Thanks. And we're just going to expand the scope of the Q&A. So nothing else is going to change here. I want to just briefly introduce two people who you've only seen in the recorded portion of our work. And the first is Dr. Lawrence Miroff, and you just heard from him. He's the immediate past CEO and president of Imaging Consultants. He's also an adjunct clinical professor at two medical schools in Florida, the University of Florida and the University of South Florida. For 20 years, he was a member in a 45 plus radiologist practice where he had several leadership positions. He's received multiple awards, and he has been the Aunt Minnie Most Effective Radiology Educator in 2010. And he's also on our Radiology Leadership Institute board. And he received the gold medal of both the Florida Radiology Society and the ACR. And he's authored more than 80 articles and presented over 1,000 invited lectures. And the other speaker who we're going to add into the conversation is Dr. Scott Trular, and he's in his 17th year of private practice in general radiology in an 8-person group in Iowa City, Iowa. He has held national offices in the ACR, and he's the current chair of the board of the Iowa Medical Society. He's developed a second career where he's passionate about teaching medical trainees and early career physicians about personal financial planning. You heard his great talk already, and we're looking forward to having him in the conversation. And with that, I'm going to open it up to all questions. And it's probably a good time because one of the questions that came up that's in the chat room is if we can come back to how and when do you discuss salary and benefit topics when you're going through the process of interviewing and then looking at a job. And now that we have two more speakers on, it's a good time maybe to come to that, circle back to that.
Well, I'll jump in first, but certainly Peter and Scott and others in private practice can take it from there. But typically, money is not the first thing that a group wants to hear out of your mouth if you are interviewing for a job. That said, you certainly don't want to take a job without understanding what you are going to be offered prior to becoming a shareholder. You want to know if there are opportunities for you to become a shareholder. And finally, what generally can you expect as a compensation package when you are a shareholder? Typically, these discussions take place either near the end of the first visit or more likely the second visit that you make, because I think most fellows, residents and fellows who are accepting a job take a second visit, often with a significant other. And that second visit is the time to nail down these loose ends of compensation.
I'd like to echo that, and Dr. Miroff gave me some great advice when I was finalizing the group that I was looking at and such. And one of the good points, because one of the questions that came up is, should I have a lawyer look at my contract, at the offer, and that included, the benefits and one of the questions, or one of the points he made was, one of the great questions you can ask is, am I signing something that is, how is that different than everyone else in the group? And that is very telling, because you want to be joining a group that you're confident in, that you feel like these are going to be your business partners in the private sector. So you don't want to feel like you're being giving something that you're not going to be getting that the other partners. I mean, I'm lucky enough in a group where I have the same vacation as on the climbers pathway as the rest of the partners in the group. And that was very telling for me because I felt like I was being treated equitably. And so when it comes to benefits and these sorts of things, I agree that's later in the conversation, but you also want to politely ask, how is that different? How is it going to be different when I'm climbing? How is that going to be different when I'm a partner? And these sorts of questions are absolutely your right to ask.
I would second what Dr. Miroff said, which is end of the first day is about the right time. It should not be the first thing you talk about because your job is not about money. If that's your primary concern, then you're probably going to have a difficult professional career with lots of challenges along the way. So, but by the end of the first day, you should have a sense of the culture of the practice, the physical geography of the practice, the some idea of the types of people who work here, the length of your day. And by the end of the day, then usually there'll be some sort of a suggestion of what kind of a package they may be offering you, or they'll say, we're going to send you that in the next 48 hours, something like that. But it should be pretty much right in there. Obviously, money can be a deal breaker. So it's something you want to get, affirmed and established fairly early on. But at the same time, they may wait to make an offer to you, or the offer may change based upon your preferences. You may say in the first meeting, I'm looking for a half-time position, or I want a full-time position with an option to go to 80% in the future. You may say, I value money over time or time over money, and I'm willing to adjust the schedule to the needs of the group within that interest of mine. And so those are all things that could affect the offer they give you. The one last thing I would add is that particularly in a private practice, I always get asked when I'm hiring a physician, what do the partners make? And I always answer, I don't know. Because by the time they make partner, I don't know what we're going to be making. My income shifts by some years over $100,000 if we've made major investments in our capital contributions to our company. So I can give them a range. I will tell them what our total compensation for the last 3 years, say, has been. But I am always very upfront that in private practice, the final compensation at the end of the year will vary year by year. And so I can't make any definitive promises. I can only promise what they'll make in their years while they're building up to achieving partnership.
Dan Singer here. Yes, I would agree with what Scott was saying, that usually it occurs at the end of the first meeting where the financials are discussed. But it's important now to understand that with the larger groups, they can match almost any need for anybody. If there's a person that wants more vacation time, we usually can put that together. If they have a certain number they want to earn, we can do that too by giving them extra shifts. A lot of our young people, especially here in South Florida, are looking to make the kind of money that we hear rumors about in the upper Midwest. And the way we match that is we start them out on a night program where they work 1 week, have 2 weeks off. And one of those 2 weeks off, they work day shifts. And so we can pretty much match anyone in the country if that's their goal. So that's why it's important to discuss that out and be upfront. If you're looking for that kind of money, let us know in the first time you're here, and usually we can match a package for you. Very good.
Good. All right, thank you. Any other questions? I'm looking in the chat room. And the last thing we have here is that this person's question was answered. Let me ask one question just as an opinion question, because this is a hot topic in the RFS and YPS. How do you bring up the question of whether or not your practice is going to be sold? And if that's on the horizon, is that something that would be off-putting? Is that a fair question? I'll start with Dr. Trular because his hand is up.
Yeah, we actually talk about this. I just had a similar webinar that we talked about this at length. I think that the way you find out is by asking them directly in that first day. Just say, hey, I'm looking at a variety of different jobs. There's a lot of things happening in the profession. Is your group investigating being sold out? And the way they answer it will tell you as much as the answer itself. Because if everybody gets all squirmy in their chairs and starts straightening their ties, then you've got your answer, no matter what follows after that, But the ones who aren't going to sell out will say, we're not going to sell out, ever. That's not what we do. We're never going to give away our independence. If they answer that way, you also have your answer. So I say you ask and then see how they respond, and ask multiple people on interview day that exact same question, because the person who's the face of the practice that day might have a very smooth answer to that, but the third person you meet might get this very shocked look on their face and then stammer to come up with an answer. But you got to ask.
Thank you. Anybody else want to chime in?
It's
Yeah,
interesting. I'm hearing more in, especially groups out west, that you can ask and they'll give you a response. But then when you get a contract from these groups, you're going to see in writing that they make no guarantee that they won't be sold out before you become a partner. And things could change. So I think you've got to be aware of that the job market and the relations with corporate radiology is changing so fast in this country. You may get that in writing from your group of interest.
Well, one thing you possibly can do, and I've seen it, so I know that in at least one instance it has worked, is if you are really wanting to go there, and if the group really wants you, it would not be unreasonable for you to ask for some protection. And it might be, for example, the first year that you're there on a shareholder track, that you get 20% of what a shareholder gets if they're sold at that point, and it can escalate a little from there. They're not going to protect you fully, there's no question about that, but depending on your skill sets, depending on what you bring to the group, depending on how much each side wants to consummate the deal, it is not unreasonable to at least ask for protection.
Okay. And then I'm going to ask a related question, and then we're going to go to a different topic. The related question is a question from one of the participants. How would the practice selling out affect us?
Well, it's going to have a very negative effect on young people who are not partners. Obviously, if somebody is given, if all the shareholders are given a $4 million check, and therefore the compensation going forward is lowered by a couple of $100,000, those people that are not shareholders, that are not protected in any way, face a compensation that is lower without the offsetting upfront money that was given to shareholders. And this is my major issue with the national entrepreneurial companies. I think they're having a major negative impact on the young people thinking about entering our specialty.
Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, Larry's correct, because I can see that in my own group. You know, unfortunately, I was purchased after the original buyout with corporate, but basically our incomes are down approximately 30% what they should be. And so myself and all the younger people after me, that's the kind of hit we're seeing, because there was a selling for a large amount of money. And now we've been sold again. And the first group that even got that money, they're not unlikely to get it a second time around. But I think that was very excellent that Larry mentioned, that if you are negotiating with any group now and you really feel you're going to be an asset and you're needed, it's a great idea to bring it up and say you want some of that package if there's a sale. Because there have been people, young people, that have gotten extra income when there was a sale. They don't get as much as a partner, but some of them I know have gotten 20 to 25%, which is a lot of money.
Yep.
So our young residents should be hinting and discussing that with the groups.
Dr. Miroff, have you ever heard of a new hire being asked to have a clause where they are released from their non-compete in the event of a private equity sellout?
I personally do not know of such an example, but I will tell you that I sincerely doubt that groups will release someone from a non-compete. A non-compete, in my view, is the most important clause that a private practice radiology group can have with its member radiologists. And the reason for that is not because you're concerned that they're going to compete with you. It's that it prevents hospitals from cherry picking the group and totally emasculating the ability of that practice to negotiate. Otherwise, they'll say, the hospital will say, well, if you're not going to accept this, I'm going to cancel the contract. I'll take Scott and Frank, but Larry and Dan and Jen are on the outs. So the hospital can and will cherry pick you if you do not have a non-compete.
Okay. I'm going to move on because I know we're over time and I want to get to 2 more questions before we stop, but we're going to push out for a few more minutes. Next question is how do you approach someone for networking? Anybody want to take that one?
I can answer that. So, I mean, back in the days before COVID, when we were at a large meeting, if you're meeting someone or if you're introduced to someone through a local meeting, what I would do is that I would ask, after a conversation, I would ask for a business card. And then at that same night or the morning after, I would send an email, thank them for their time, or, choose a specific thing that you were discussing at the time and talk about it and just hope to keep in touch. You could keep in touch through email, but also remember that we live in the world of social media. And Twitter has a significant value in networking. You can build your own connections. I mean, I made friends through Twitter with people I have not met in person. I was invited to 2 talks through Twitter because, they just see me active there and they hear about, the things that I tweet about. And I actually recognize one of the names now from our attendees, and we follow each other. So this is the new world, and a lot of people are afraid of tweeting. You don't have to tweet, but you can follow the people you like, and a lot of people would be very open to direct messaging. So that's what I recommend.
Okay. And then
I'll chime in there as well. Sorry.
Sure.
Alluding to something I believe Dr. Oliveira said earlier, I think it is important to approach people at the time of when they give a conference, maybe wait for them afterwards, things like that. But also just to not be afraid and to be very clear about what you're wanting to establish a relationship for. Say that, you have a mutual interest in this area, you love their lecture, and then follow up on it after the conference, maybe a few days later, and keep that relationship going.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The final question is going to be, it's an interesting one. Is it possible to have a 3-year contract with the group or institution off the bat, or will my contract, paraphrasing a bit, just be year to year when I start?
I can answer for how our group handles that. When I started, depending on the job market, like as it got more and more, as it was more of the applicants kind of job market, we actually lowered our time to partnership. So when I started, it was 3 years to partnership, and my contract it said you have a 3-year contract. It delineated what my salaries were every year. There were clauses in there that obviously said the time frame that on either part that you would give if you wanted to end your contract, or if the group wanted to end your contract, how much time you would give or how much time they would have to give you for notice. And then, as I said, with the change in the job market, we've actually lowered it to 2 years. So again, it has like a clearly defined, you have this contract for 2 years, but obviously if there was some reason, they would have to give you so much time notice to end it.
Okay. Thanks.
Dan Singer, we have 3-year contracts for both people on partnership tracks and people that are on associate track. And it just behooves the group and the individual that there is that strong possibility that you'll remain for 3 years. So on both sides, I think it's good to go for a 3-year contract. If for whatever reason the group doesn't like you, they have all sorts of clauses that they can end it even before a year, and vice versa. You'll have the ability to leave too, usually by fulfilling certain parts of the contract, to leave earlier than the 3 years. So I don't think it should be a difficult task to get a 3-year contract, because it helps on both sides.
You know,
or that in my group, we have a 1-year contract, but in all the contracts, either party in the contract can give 90 days notice and get out, which means really you have a 90-day contract for all intents and purposes. So don't get confused about what you care about is how you get out of it, not the length of the initial contract. That's my opinion, but Dr. Miroff knows more about this than I do.
No, I was going to say the exact same thing. I've seen various lengths of contracts, and yet in all of my years, I've never seen that really matter. I've seen people leave. I've seen people get fired. I've seen people urged to resign or face being fired, but never because of the length of the contract. Because as Scott points out, there are typically outs, whether they are 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. There are terminations without cause and terminations for cause. For cause is typically immediate. I mean, you commit a felony, you shouldn't stick around for 120 days. If for some reason the group determines you're not a fit, whether you're a partner or on a partner track, I personally believe they ought to pay you off and walk you to the door, but they tend not to want to do that. But the length, yeah, go
would
ahead.
be important to ask during your visits with your present, the employer that you're thinking you're going to join, is how long is the hospital contract? Because your group may have a 3-year contract, but there's only 1 year left. And that can change everything overnight after 1 year. So it's important to have a handle on that when you're interviewing.
And that's true, Dan, but I would again bring up Scott's point, and the same thing that's true of group contracts. You know, your employment agreement between the group and the radiologist is typical of a hospital contract between the hospital and its radiology group. There are typically 90, 120 day outs that can be invoked. It's always nice, it sounds nice, say, oh, we have a 5-year contract. And then you say, well, you know, what is the out clause? And it's typically 90 or 120 days. So yes, there is some comfort, but I wouldn't rely on that very much.
Okay. Well, on that note, we're going to have to stop. We are over time, but I want to start by thanking Dr. Nathan for her work on this with me. I want to thank Anne-Marie and her staff, especially Jennifer Pendo, for all their hard work on this. Thank the faculty for doing an absolutely fantastic job, particularly with the pivot to virtual. We really hope we're going to get to do this in person with all of you again when this is over. But we appreciate that very much. I want to thank the participants, great questions, and just really thrilled to do this with you all today. And I hope we get a chance to work together in the future. So thanks for the great work.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.